Hello, and welcome everybody to the National Trends in Disability Employment,
or nTIDE,
Lunch and Learn series.
Just a few housekeeping items before we begin.
This webinar is being recorded.
We will post an archive of each webinar each month on our website at www.researchondisability.org/nTIDE.
This site will also provide copies of the presentations, the speakers' bios, full transcripts, and other valuable resources.
As an attendee of this webinar, you are a viewer.
To ask questions of the speakers, click on the Q&A box on your webinar screen and type your questions into the box.
Speakers will review these questions and provide answers during the last section of the webinar.
Some questions may be answered directly in the Q&A box.
If you have any questions following this recording, please contact us at disability.statistics@unh.edu
or toll free at 866-538-9521 for more information.
Thanks for joining us.
Enjoy today's webinar.
Hi everybody, this is Andrew Houghton at the University of New Hampshire, here for our April 5th version of nTIDE. So we'll be reporting the March numbers. Just to get some few things out of the way, so the nTIDE occurs every noon Eastern time on the release of the nTIDE, which is usually the first Friday of every month. The nTIDE is a joint effort of the University of New Hampshire and Kessler Foundation, along with the Association of University Centers on Disability, AUCD. nTIDE is part of the Rehabilitation Research and Training Center on Employment Policy and Measurement, which is funded by the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research, otherwise known as NIDLR. As before, we have three parts. Part one will report the numbers. John will talk about the structure of the numbers, and I'll give the latest numbers. Part two, we'll hear from Denise Roselle from AUCD to give us the update on the news, and perhaps we have an interviewee sometimes. Part three, we'll hear from Anna, and I should have asked you to pronounce your last name, but I'll leave it to you guys to pronounce. And we'll hear about her project Rooted in Rights. Then at the very end, we'll have Q&A, but you can also, as was mentioned in the introduction, you can type questions in the Q&A box, and they can be answered either live or via text message from other folks. So now I'm going to turn it over to John to talk about nTIDE, the report as a whole. John?
Good day, everybody. The nTIDE, as Andrew said, is a monthly report. It also includes a press release and an infographic that looks at the most recent employment statistics. And the data is from the jobs report released by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics on the first Friday of each month, typically. And as Andrew mentioned, it's a joint effort between the Kessler Foundation and UNH. Next slide. The source of the data is from the Current Population Survey, which is a survey that the Bureau of Labor Statistics fields every month. And it's the source of the official unemployment rate, which the media makes so much of. The nTIDE includes civilians aged 16 through 64 not living in institutions. The data has been available, the data on disabilities has been available since 2008 onward, when the federal government, the Census Bureau primarily, included the 6 disability questions for the first time. The data we report is not seasonally adjusted, and that's why we compare the current month to the same month last year in order to account for seasonality. Andrew, I'll hand it over to you for presenting the numbers.
All right, thanks, John. So without further ado, the numbers for this month are rather disappointing. So the employment to population ratio, so the percentage of people that are employed, went down slightly for people with disabilities from 31.7 to 31.1, so 6/6 of a percentage point. It went up very similarly slightly for people without disabilities. It went up from 73.6 to 74.2. So these are pretty small changes. And so if we'll talk about what they look like compared to last month and previous months in a second. We also look at the labor force participation rate. So this is the percentage that are not just working, but also add in the people who are actively looking for work in the last 4 weeks. So this is more of a measure of general participation in the labor market, not just being employed. And so very similar story, you know, down 0.6% from 34.8 to 34.2. For people without disabilities, it went up slightly from 76.7 to 77.2. So when we overall, as we're comparing to last year, things are kind of stable. I'd rather see them flipped around the other way. These aren't tremendous changes given that there's a year apart. So I think that these are bland, to use a technical term. So if we look at the overall trend, since, as John mentioned, they go back to 2008. If you haven't seen this graph before, and you haven't been on nTIDE before, what you see in the graph are people without disabilities. Generally reflects the economy as the Great Recession hits in 2008, 2009, and then there's a slow march, and the kind of the jaggedy peak is really the seasonality that John mentioned, that we don't have enough years yet to adjust for seasonality. And so what you see is that if what you're seeing is the month-to-month comparison, the big dots are the months of March, and what we're really seeing is kind of holding steady if we look across from March to March, so that we don't have to, you know, reconcile the seasonality of things. If we snap a trend line in this, we can see the slow progression for people with disabilities, and then slow progression for people without disabilities. And then for people with disabilities, we really didn't start seeing improvements until, say, 2015. And then once we hit 2016, 17, and 18, we start seeing improvements. And I've been doing some research with a grad student here at the University of Hampshire, and this is really one of the first times we've ever seen improvement. And at some point during nTIDE, I'll present going back to the 1960s with not this measure, but a similar measure that we can do monthly statistics for. And so what we're seeing is kind of a leveling off. This trend line shows a little bit of a decrease at the end. I wouldn't go to the bank with that if I were betting on whether it's decreasing or not. Really, it's, you know, we need several months in a row of decrease to be able to make a call about whether things are going the other direction. All right. Next, I'm going to turn it over. So we'll do question and answer either through the Q&A or at the end, but I'm going to turn it over to Denise. Take it away, Denise. You're muted, Denise.
I'm still muted. Okay.
There you go.
Can you hear me now? Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, everybody. So as you know, I'm Denise Roselle from AUCD. I often start with a federal policy update. So a few things have happened, plus something that I just found out about this morning that's not even on the slide. So the first thing, we've been talking about Money Follows the Person. For those of you who follow Money Follows, you know that there was a short reauthorization, like 3 months, something like that, at the end of last year. I'm really excited to tell you that a $20 million was just voted by the House and the Senate to go into Money Follows. It should be signed by the President shortly. So it means, for now at least, Money Follows continues. And we're still looking for a longer reauthorization. I think we're at a year now. And we're still looking for a 3 to 5 year reauthorization. But for right now, good news is it continues and there's funding. So yay us. Second thing, able age adjustment. I'm not sure I've talked about this on this call before, so I wanted to hit on this. There's a bill S651 in the Congress called the Able Age Adjustment Act. As I'm sure you're aware, if you know anything about the ABLE Act, that was passed several years ago. ABLE said that you had to have suffered a disability, suffered quote unquote, acquired your disability at age 26 or before. What that means, and we did that at the time because of the money and how much it would cost if we had a higher age. What that's meant and what this bill would change the age to 46. It would up 20 years so that the acquisition of disability would have to have been by age 46 in order to have an ABLE account. And an ABLE account is, for those who may not know, an ABLE account means that you can save a certain amount of money but not lose your benefits. And it doesn't count against benefits such as Medicaid and Social Security. So S651, an important bill, age 46 would make a big difference. Part of what we've seen in ABLE in trying to set up the ABLE accounts across the country is that we don't have a big enough pool of people joining in. And so consequently, obviously, there needs to be a certain number joining for these to succeed. So we're hoping that this one can move forward. This is one where I actually, at the moment, don't see a lot of opposition. So that doesn't mean there isn't any, and it's probably because they haven't priced it out yet. So anything you can do out there, talking to your members of Congress about how important this is and why being able to save money if you're a person with a disability is important. Very odd, my camera's kind of doing something weird, but I guess you'll just have to see me in blur. Okay, let's see if that does anything better. Nope, it's blurry. All right. Third, the Higher Ed Act continues to move forward. I know I keep telling you that it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. In the Senate, they're actually negotiating. The Republicans and Democrats are negotiating Higher Ed Act reauthorization and actively negotiating. They're thinking they may have a bill from the Senate as early as June. And when that bill is done, it'll move forward and we'll hopefully go to the House, et cetera, et cetera. Higher Ed Act includes the inclusive post-secondary programs for students with intellectual disabilities, the TIPSIDs. It also includes a lot of personal preparation. It also includes a lot of other access issues. So this is exciting. We've been talking about it for a couple of years, but it's coming. Federal court struck down the Medicaid work requirements in Arkansas and Kentucky in this last week. As I hope I've been following, some states are requiring people to work in order to receive Medicaid. They have to have tried to work in order to receive Medicaid. Generally speaking, those requirements do not include people with disabilities, depending on how you define that. I know I'm out of focus, Art. I don't know. Move it closer. See, that's not helping. I don't know what happened. Art is telling me that I'm out of focus. I know. I can't. There. It fixed. Okay. The work requirements. Generally speaking, the work requirements, what you hear from the states is that it does not include people with disabilities. It depends on how they define people with disabilities. So it's something we've been watching really closely. And the federal court has struck down the requirements in Arkansas and Kentucky, and that's good news. Basically saying that Medicaid is a health program and is not a work program, and therefore you can't have work requirements. The last thing that's not on my slide that I literally just heard this morning is that the WIOA reports from the states are out. I will put, when I get off, I'll put in the Q&A the links where you can find them on the RSA website. WIOA requires states to report on performance. And on the RSA website are the performance reports for every state, as well as a national report. So my comment to you all would be both to look at them for your state, but also to make sure you go in and use those as a link to go talk to your VR director to say, hey, I see this is good, this is not, based on what you're seeing, and this is how you compare to the national. Important stuff, and I have not looked at them at all, I would tell you, because again, I just heard they're out. So, but I'll put in the chat box the link. Okay, next slide, Andrew. a few things going on. This one, I want to do a big shout out to the folks at APSE. APSE has done, working with the folks at State Data at ICI Boston, have done some one-pagers that are phenomenal, state-by-state resources on employment first. Andrew, flip to the next page if you would. This is the example of the national one. One-page, simple graphic talking about 14C certificates and numbers in the state. What is competitive employment? What is integrated? These are really good. I would encourage you to do the one from your state, take it and do visits with it about employment first, about 14C, about competitive integrated employment. Big shout out to the folks at APSE. And this is the national one. The next slide, Andrew. And this is the example of, for instance, the Arkansas one. I just pulled Arkansas, but it gives you some really nice specific data. This is what we talk about when we talk about how do you take research and use it for policy. This is what we mean. This is the thing your policymakers are going to want to see. And this, I really encourage you to use this as you're doing conversations both in your state and nationally on competitive integrated employment. And I know you guys are, a lot of you folks are really interested in that. Okay, next slide. Autonomous vehicles, really interesting new study. I've had this conversation and we had this in February at the State of the State meeting as well. People are really talking about driverless cars. And what does that mean for accessibility? And what does that mean for people with disabilities? You know, there are those who are not in the disability community who are talking about how this will be the greatest thing since sliced bread for people with disabilities. And then people with disabilities in the community say, whoa, 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 whoa. Don't just assume this is going to work for us. And that's kind of what I see in this report. It's a study by the Intelligent Transportation Society of America. It was federally funded. You can see all kinds of people are part, both from the Disability and Older Americans organizations, as well as the equipment manufacturers, the network companies, et cetera, who were in the report. Flip it to the next slide, Angie, if you would. And, you know, their findings, not surprising to any of us in the disability world, he's getting there, is that, again, not surprising. You know, the way that people with disabilities are going to benefit from autonomous vehicles is that they're going to be involved with accessibility in the beginning in the design process. But to have those organizations, this organization of the folks who build these things and the manufacturers, all saying we need to be involved at the beginning with people with disabilities in how we design and how we work, I think is really cool and really important. So this is another one. For those of you, I've gotten lots of questions about this. For those of you who are interested, there's a link that'll take you. The live link for the entire report wasn't available, but the link on the previous slide for the executive summary is there, and it'll take you to the full report. I think the full report link is now live. And I'll see if I can find that and put it in the chat box too. Okay, next one, there you go. We've had a lot of conversation on this call. We've had a whole 3-part series on supported employment, IPS, and folks with mental health conditions. This is a new study that's out from Mathematica, looking at long-term impacts of these kinds of interventions. You know, the federal agencies have been doing this, have been trying to fund IPS and support employment for people with mental health conditions for a long time. And this looks at long-term, what's the impact. Interesting, it's not finding a lot of long-term reliance, but it doesn't reduce long-term reliance on federal disability benefits. Again, I'm not sure that's a surprise, but it's an interesting study, and I think you're going to hear about it. So I would definitely, for those of you who are interested in this, to look at it, and then I'm not sure the purpose is to get people off long-term disability benefits, part of the purpose perhaps, but I think we need to be ready to answer some of the comments in this one. Okay, next slide. This one on non-discrimination and equal opportunity under WIOA. WIOA specifically talks about in section 188, non-discrimination, and particularly with the American Job Centers. I think this is another one that came off the American Job Centers website, that they are looking at this, and I think anytime that happens, that's a big deal. And this is across disability. This is not, I mean, this is across groups. This is not just disability. This is non-discrimination, equal employment across the board. But there's a reference guide now that they put up there that can be used. And this one particularly is on disability, the reference guide, but the law and the rest is on other things as well. But this one looks at equal access to programs and non-discrimination policies and affirmative obligations and ways to address that. And I think, again, from the American Job Center point of view and the local and state workforce boards, this is an important thing for them to have and for us to share with them if you are in touch with your local jobs boards. Okay, next one, Andrew. Promise. Both, I would be remiss, since I am one of the co-directors of the Promise TA Center, but also since we had Ellie from the Wisconsin Promise Project speak on one of our previous nTIDEs. There are a couple of important things coming up about Promise. This one is Mathematica again, NPR, on improving transition outcomes. It's the early findings from the Promise evaluation by NPR. And they're looking at a whole series of things. It's the 18-month impact evaluation. They're looking at some of the different approaches from different Promise programs. And Promise, I'm sorry, I should have said that to begin with, is the transition age youth. And what happens when you surround the family and the youth with services, intensive case management, financial benefits, financial counseling, benefits counseling, all kinds of services. How do the youth and the families do better? And it was a large funded, I mean, it was 5 million, it was millions of dollars more than that, project from the Department of Education in partnership with others in the federal government, including SSA. And this is the 18-month from NPR. Clearly it was a 5-year project, so we don't have end data yet from NPR. But, and now the next one, the other thing, that one is a webinar April 11th from noon to 1:30 with NPR. The next one, there's a live webcast that the Promise TA Center is sponsoring on April 24th. It's going to be at the Press Club here in DC from 1:45 to 4. We'll be live streaming it. And basically there are 3 panels. All of the projects are going to be speaking. And they're looking at accomplishments and challenges in the context of disability and poverty, which is one of the things that we've really seen from the project systems change level. Systematic and local coordination, again, some of the things they've learned at 5 years, and then federal, state, and local impact for youth receiving SSI. So the Mathematica one is, Mathematica is obviously the outside evaluator. They're going to be looking at the 18-year from the outside evaluator point of view. These are the projects themselves who are now winding down there in their no-cost year, looking back at the last 5 years to say, you know, what have we learned before the 5-year evaluator comes out with the data. What have we learned about systems change, about disability and poverty, about youth, and how to serve youth differently than you might serve adults with disabilities. So the link is there. Please register for it. We'd love to have people join us and watch this. It'll ultimately be put up online as well, but it's going to be a live webcast, so mark your calendars. Next one, Andrew. A couple of internships that are out there, and these are the links. Anthem is doing inclusive internships. Right now, they're being filled on a rolling basis. This is how you find them, and they're all over the country. They're in various places. There's a couple in DC. There's a couple in Indiana, which is where their headquarters are. There's a variety of these. I think I want to say there's 9, but and they're specifically looking for people with disabilities who are enrolled or completing undergraduate or graduate degrees. This is a cool one for people that you're working with. They are looking for all kinds of folks with disabilities. That is not limited. And I saw this come across my desk and I got excited for those of you who are on this call. It would be a very interesting internship to have, and they're really looking to learn. And then the Nickel internships, I think the summer internship with Nickel is closed, but they do an internship every semester. And that one also just came across my desk recently. And I thought, you know, National Council for Independent Living here in DC, if you're a policy geek like I am, if you have, if you're a person with a disability particularly, who's a policy geek like I am, these are really good ways to get into the policy world here in DC with an organization that gets it and brings people in every semester. And I also would add, there are a variety of other internships available in the DC area within the disability community. So if it's something that you're interested in, reach out to some of the organizations because we're always looking for interns. Sometimes those interns are paid I will say, and sometimes not, which I totally understand is a big deal. The nickel ones are paid. The AAPD ones are paid. So AMPA clearly is a paid one. But I would really encourage any of you who are policy geeks to reach out. Okay, next one. Next slide. I thought so. So it is my pleasure to introduce Anna Zivart, who is the program director from Rooted in Rights. Anna, prior to being with Rooted in Rights, co-founded a digital media firm in 2010. She produced a video for the Innocence Project, worked with ACLU to find citizens disenfranchised by voter ID laws, and a whole bunch more. She's basically into challenging the status quo. And I'm really excited to have Anna here. The Rooted in Rights people have done some work for us at AUCD, and they're doing really cool things, both themselves in their own right, and also then with other organizations. So Anna, I'm really excited to have you here, and I will toss it to you.
Hi, making sure everyone can hear me. So my name's Anna. I'm the program director here at Rooted in Rights. I joined in July, and you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Yep, next slide. Great. So Rooted in Rights is a video and storytelling advocacy program housed within Disability Rights Washington, which is one of the federal P&As. We have a team of 9 folks. We're majority team of disabled folks. And we strongly believe in the saying that nothing about us without us, and that disabled people should be telling the stories about us, and that we should be producing those stories, writing those stories, directing those stories, and that those stories should also be accessible. All the media we create, we strive to make as accessible as possible, including audio descriptions, captioning, transcripts, alt text, and I'll talk a little more about that program. So we tell authentic, accessible stories to challenge stigma and redefine narratives around disability, mental health, and chronic illness. Next slide. This is a photo of our team. It's a photo of folks with different abilities. There's some folks in chairs, some cane users, and I'll next play a little video that allows us to introduce ourselves to you as a team. Next slide. So actually, we'll do this real quick. So yeah, we are we're Seattle based, but we have some folks that work with us nationally. In addition to the work we do partnering with organizations to highlight their issues, we focus on campaigns for accessibility. We also run a blog and host video advocacy trainings for folks who want to learn video advocacy skills. Next slide. All right, this is the trailer for us. Go ahead and play the video.
A man with a camera mounted to his wheelchair waits for a city train. Next, a woman with a white cane sips coffee against autumn leaves. Then, a rotating view of an office. 4 women with mixed abilities meet. Team members take turns talking to camera.
We're Rooted in Rights,
a team of disabled filmmakers,
storytellers, and activists.
The man with the camera on his chair zooms down a steep sidewalk and smiles broadly.
Most of the time, we aren't in control of the stories told about us.
People speak for us.
We're here to change that.
We're here to change that.
We're here to change that.
A woman spinning a smiling toddler in a swing.
Whether it's parenting, education,
transportation,
He scans a bus pass.
or jobs,
equal access, community living,
or mental health.
We share the diverse and dynamic experiences of our community.
we aren't just in it for the feels.
We are Rooted in Rights.
We are Rooted in Rights.
We are Rooted in Rights.
Follow and subscribe at Rooted in Rights.
All right, next slide. So that is us. I want to talk through some of the campaigns that we're super engaged with right now to give you an idea of some of the projects we work on. One of our big campaigns is accessible videos and digital media. And this is about getting other folks, especially other folks creating digital content, to make sure that content is created in a way that can reach the largest audience possible, which means making it accessible. So I mentioned we include audio description, captions, transcripts in our video content, and we're really trying to train and encourage other folks to do the same. And so part of what we're doing for that campaign is a series of videos. I'm going to play a couple of them. Actually, let's go ahead. Next slide. This will give you a sense of what we do.
Alt text in 60 seconds. Alt text is a written description of the images you post online. It helps everyone, including blind and low vision folks using screen readers, enjoy your visual content. On Facebook, use alt text by uploading an image through the website and clicking the Edit Photo icon in the corner of the thumbnail. Click the alt text icon on the left sidebar of the following window and write your description of the photo in the text field that appears. Then click Save. For Twitter, make sure you first turn on alt text by checking the Compose Image Descriptions box in the Accessibility tab on your settings page. Afterwards, simply click the Add Description footer at the bottom of your image's thumbnail and include your description at the bottom of the following screen. Instagram just recently got on board the alt text train, and we're glad to hear it. When creating a new post, tap Advanced Settings at the bottom of the window. Next, tap Write Alt Text beneath the accessibility header and write your alt text. In this case, birthday cake with a yellow background and a lit candle in the shape of a number 1. Accessibility is cool.
So I hope alt text isn't something new to anyone on this call, but if it is, alt text allows us, people using screen readers, to understand what's being displayed in the images that you're sharing on social media. And so that's how to do it on those platforms. We really encourage everyone to do it. In addition to encouraging folks to use alt text for their images, we want people to make accessible video content because a lot of what we do is video. And so this next video describes some really, really basic steps that you can take. Go ahead and play.
Hey YouTube, it's Anna Ziebarts. I'm the program director here at Rooted in Rights. I've been making social videos since the birth of YouTube, but it wasn't until I joined the Rooted in Rights team here last summer that I learned the secret for making viral videos. If you want to make your videos go viral, you've got to make sure you're reaching the largest audience possible. So if you fail to caption or audio describe your videos, you're losing potential audience members. Every content creator wants more people to watch your videos, right? Here are 2 quick tips. Deaf and hard of hearing folks, and folks with sensory processing disorder, as well as everyone scrolling through their timelines with the sound off, rely on captions to make sense of what's going on in your video. So caption your video. Tip number 2, include audio description. Blind and low vision folks like myself, as well as everyone else multitasking and not looking at their screens, rely on audio description to know what's going on. Audio description isn't as hard to include as you might think. If you're listening to your video without visuals, what critical information would you be missing?
All black and white film of 2 guys in exercise uniforms. One balances carefully on the needs of the other.
There, that's real balance and poise.
If you have text on the screen, have someone read it. This is also true for titles, like someone's name or profession.
A softly focused photo of Clark Matthews, lead producer at Rooted in Rights.
It gets a little more complicated when you think about other visuals. But think of this as your chance as the creator to get creative. What actually is that critical information you are trying to convey visually? Make sure that's also conveyed through audio. That's it. It's that simple. By making your videos accessible, you're guaranteed to reach people who wouldn't have been able to enjoy your videos before. And you get a bigger audience. Maybe your next video actually will go viral.
Rooted in Rights logo with interlocking trees. Share this video.
So if you want to learn more about how to do accessible video content, how to make your social media accessible, we encourage you to check out our website, rootedinrights.org/access. There's a lot of information there on that website. There's links to these videos. And there also is a document that we worked on in conjunction with the Ford Foundation that goes into even more detail about how to do accessible videos. And so, this is social video is something that's evolving constantly. And we, best practices evolve as well. And so we're also always open to feedback and from hearing more from different folks in the disabled community about what works for you and what doesn't work. We are pushing folks to try to do, when you do Instagram stories, for example, use audio description, use captions on those. We're in preliminary sort of investigation and conversation with folks about how, when we are thinking about 360 or VR video, how do we make that accessible? So trying to figure out how we can make accessibility, digital accessibility, part of content creation in this campaign. Next slide. Shifting gears, another one of the campaigns we're working on, we're calling Parenting Without Pity. And this is a way for parents who are disabled to share their experience, both as disabled people and as parents, with parents of children who are disabled, who don't have that experience with the disability community. This campaign comes out of the experience I think many of us had as children, where we were the only disabled person we knew at the time, and that our parents, you know, as well-intentioned as they were, didn't know a lot about disability. And for many of us, you know, there was a lot of shame, there was a lot of trying to hide it, there was a lot of trying to overcome it. And so this is a program that's about encouraging parents of disabled children to really connect to the disability community, connect to disabled adults, and allow themselves to to educate themselves about what it means to be disabled and what their child's life could be like, and allow their child to connect to that community. So to work or to share these stories, we're interviewing parents, disabled parents, about their experiences. These interviews are taking the form of a podcast series as well as transcripts. And we'll be releasing this series on Mother's Day this year. So it's not public yet, but stay tuned. And if you have any parents in your networks who are disabled and want to share their stories with us, we are still recording interviews, and so they can reach out to us. Let's go ahead and next slide. These are some of the stories that we've gotten so far, and I just want to show this to you so you see sort of the range and the power of these narratives. Go ahead and play it.
Rooted in Rights presents Parenting Without Pity.
If I would have had parents that were aware of or fighting for disability rights, it would have taken me less time to realize that like I could be a mom, or
I've always felt very lucky to have been raised by a disabled mother. Nobody ever stopped to consider how awesome it is.
I hated what the wheelchair meant for some social situations, but I didn't hate being disabled. I didn't really care that my legs didn't work.
I would hope that parents would find a way to separate out what they perceive to be the negative aspects of a kid's disability with their identity.
We have to change that culture for our kids. There's still this gigantic culture of shame and embarrassment around disability. We need to make that go away.
Questioning a child too much about what they can and can't do can be sending certain messages. Yeah, treat their disability as one of the many traits that makes up who they are.
You will always be the parent of a child who is disabled. At some point, you're going to have to step back.
Raise them to know that they can do whatever they want to do. They might be needing to do it differently than what the standard is.
You've got to focus on the individual, building them up, teaching them that disability is not a bad thing, connecting them with adults with disabilities.
The most important thing for parents to truly understand disability is to have continuous positive exposure to disabled people. You know, I think projects like this the constant exposure to disability in meaningful ways can go a long way.
The Parenting Without Pity project is a storytelling resource for people with disabilities to help educate parents of disabled children. To learn more and to share your story, visit rootedinrights.org/parents.
So yes, that's the website to go to. If you know any parents who want to share their stories, if you're a parent who wants to share your story, you can read more and reach out to us there. Next slide. The last campaign I really want to focus on is our Accessible Streets and Transit campaign. And this is a campaign where we are focused here in Seattle because we want to have an impact at the local level on making our city a place where people with disabilities can get around safely, quickly, reliably. And for many of us with disabilities, that transportation is a major barrier. And so we have started working with a coalition of other groups here, groups that don't necessarily always work with the disability community, environmental groups, transportation groups, bicycling groups, pedestrian groups, and working with them in coalition to make sure that the things they're asking for include our needs and that they're supporting us on the issues that are important to us around transportation and street design. Next slide. So I want to show this video, which is a video we worked on as part of this coalition. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
I'm Clark.
We both live in Seattle.
We both use wheelchairs.
And we're both tired of these cars blocking the intersections.
Clark and Vanessa attempt to cross the street, but a van blocks the crosswalk. Then they navigate around a huge charter bus blocking the crosswalk. Next, they attempt to weave through several cars blocking an intersection.
Seriously?
I don't know.
Try not to die, please.
For pedestrians who can't step up onto the sidewalk, blocking a curb ramp means we have to ride in the street through traffic just to get out of the intersection. Like, the reality is, when you block the box, you block us out.
It's our access and it's our safety.
Better enforcement at intersections will make our streets safer for everyone. A message from Rooted in Rights and Transportation Choices Coalition, Transit for All.
All right, next slide. So this video had an incredible reach, at least compared to a lot of our other content. It reached over 1.5 million people on Facebook, 67,000 views on Twitter, got some local news coverage. And it really helped frame the debate around a piece of legislation that got introduced in the Washington legislature this year around allowing cameras to be able to enforce cars that are blocking intersections and cars that are blocking bus lanes. That bill we're still trying to get passed. It looks like it may actually happen. There's been a lot of negotiation, but we are really excited that we were able to play such a big role in getting it passed and supporting it and framing the debate so that it wasn't about, people getting tickets. It was about, no, this is our safety. This is our lives on the line here, and this is why we need this piece of legislation to be passed. Next slide. So, because that video had such a big reach, I think transportation and environmental advocates that we had started to work with really saw the potential of partnering with the disability community to achieve the goals that we all want, which is a safer and healthier city with reliable transportation. We made a video. We had a bunch of record snowfall here in Seattle this winter, and people were not prepared to clear their sidewalks. The city wasn't prepared to make people clear their sidewalks, and so snow stayed on the sidewalks for a week, and a lot of folks were trapped inside. And so we made a video about that. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez retweeted that, so now that video has a ton of views, and we're very excited about that. We are meeting with the city, talking to the city about how they can improve snow removal priorities next winter. And we're also partnering with advocates on a bunch of other campaigns around accessible streets and transit, including sidewalk maintenance, traffic signal timing. I'm running off to a meeting with the city right after this around how we can make sure that there is enough time for folks to cross the street safely. All ages and all abilities bike networks, multi-use paths, and streetcar and subway train station construction and design and access. Next slide.
Sorry.
Nope, no problem. That's it. So this is my contact information. This is our website. We are at Rooted in Rights. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. I encourage you to follow us all those places. You can also sign up to our email newsletters if you go to our website at rootedinrights.org. And there's my contact information as well if you have any questions about anything we presented about today. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. That's a great, I'm going to go back and leave your contact information up a little longer. So now we enter our Q&A. That was a great presentation, a lot of really cool stuff. I use captions all the time when I'm watching a video, but I don't have earbuds, so I can't, I don't want to annoy the people next to me, like in a meeting or something. All right, so let's see. Are there any questions out there? Please ask away. Let's see, I'm going to the Q&A and I'll read some to you. So this comes from Star. Are these videos you just played on alt text available on your website? You're muted, Anna.
It again. Yes, they are on our website. They are also on our Facebook and Twitter feeds, but it's probably easiest to find them on our website.
Okay. And then Star also has another follow-up question. Video interesting with tickets. Glad it passed. It might pass. Will it be used for speeding tickets? So the video cameras.
No, they're if it does pass, they will be limited just to enforcing cars blocking pieces of infrastructure like curb ramps and transit lanes.
Right. I wonder if So this is a question from me is from Andrew. I was wondering if one of the issues is the dynamics of something being too long. So you said that they would adjust the times to make sure people could get across safely, and with video and kind of artificial intelligence and various algorithms, it might be possible to have the time for crossing be dynamic based on being blocked, because what you would want to do is you want to stop people entering the box from the straightaway to allow it to clear, to basically wait for the box to clear before I wonder if there's any like engineering being done around traffic management when that kind of thing happens.
Sure. I mean, I think part of the problem is Seattle's done something called adaptive signals on that street that we filmed on. And what those do is they measured the number of cars waiting and they time the lights based on the number of cars. The problem is they have no way of measuring pedestrians or cyclists. And so those of us who drive don't have any right to cross that street really. And so, I am skeptical about all of the artificial intelligence systems that are designed around cars and moving cars and smart cars, whether they actually will take into account pedestrians and cyclists and how that will impact our safety on the street.
Can I ask a question, Andrew? It's Denise.
Sure, it's Denise.
And I see some more coming up too. Anna, what I'm curious about, first of all, I assume that all the transportation stuff is also on your website, right? Mm-hmm. Because I'm thinking that any state could use those videos, any locality or state could use those videos to have that same conversation in their state or locale. And I'm wondering if you can just give folks, because again, transportation is such a huge issue, just give folks a couple of hints on how to get started. You said you worked with a coalition of unusual partners. Just how did you guys get started? So how would you recommend somebody else get started?
That's actually one of Star's follow-up questions.
Good.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, we showed up at the meetings. We asked, we said we care about these issues. We want to start coming. And then, I think as folks got to know us, at first they were a little skeptical because often I think the disability community and environmental activists are pitted against each other. The disability community and, often biking advocates are pitted against each other. Yeah. And so there was a little bit of skepticism, I think, at first. But then once they saw that we were committed, and, I think there's also, for many of us who can't drive, we are so committed to transportation issues because it is something that really profoundly affects our day-to-day existence. And so for many, transportation and streets activists, they can go drive a car if they want to, and for a lot of us, that's not a choice. And so, we have a place to be in these conversations that I think is a very important place to center. And so I encourage you to go take over your local transportation groups that aren't disability inclusive.
I wonder, so this is kind of a follow-up based on some questions coming in. Are you aware of other states that have, or other cities that have initiatives, or is there any kind of sharing cooperative in terms of like model legislation or model government, how to interact with people? Do you know?
I mean, there's definitely a lot happening sort of in the transportation streets advocacy world with a disability focus. I don't know. I know I'm connecting actually with some folks in New York who are I know they brought a similar curb cut case to our PNA here. Yeah. and just won that. And so I think there's a little bit of conversation, but I would love there to be more conversation around disability activists and what we can be doing, because a lot of the activism has to happen at the local level, but we can definitely model what each other are doing and get stuff passed.
Yeah, it's hard to, with each government, local government, county, state, federal, it's sometimes difficult to find where to hit, where to make change. And the local P&A, the Protection and Advocacy Organization, might be able to help guide people towards the right kind of meetings. Is it zoning? Is it the mayor's office? And it's going to be really idiosyncratic to the location.
But yeah, I think there's definitely, our P&A hadn't had a ton of energy to focus on transportation. And I think a lot of that came from the fact that the folks working on the issues, it wasn't something, because they could all drive, it wasn't a critical issue for them. And it wasn't until our team sort of had this mass of people are like, we can't drive, or we don't drive, or we want a street and transit to be accessible for us, that it became a focus. And so I do think it's all about making sure that people with disabilities are, the ones driving the agenda on this, and making sure that, because once transportation, I think, is a major issue for many of us. And so making sure that gets attention.
Yeah. A P&A, I think she said, so someone asked P&A, it's not our P&A, she said it's their P&A she was talking about. So it's actually, P&A is the Protection and Advocacy Organization. So it's here it's the Disability Rights Center of New Hampshire. It's a small state, so we just have one for the whole state. Let's move on to ask a question. There's a question about the parenting video. Were the parent stories for parents whose children have disabilities, or children whose parents have disabilities, or both?
I think they could, be for both. I think our real audience here is for parents whose children have disabilities, who are in that moment where I think many parents go into when they find out their child is disabled, and are, freaking out or mourning or sad, and to be like, you know what, no, this is actually can be a great thing, and here are some disabled adults who can speak to you about that. And they're also parents, because I think there is, as a parent, once you are a parent, you have a lot more sympathy for all other parents, I think. And so we wanted to have this come from parents going to parents. So there's that common bond and common understanding that, often parenting is hard, and that choices are hard, and, every decision feels complicated, and maybe there's no right decision, but that this can be, the disability community can be a great resource for parents of disabled children, and to reach out to us and connect with us.
Yeah, this is just my own experience. So, parenting a child with a disability is different than parenting a teenager with a disability. So, my son will use his disability as an excuse sometimes to, I can't tell, actually, I just kind of tipped my hand, how do I validate his experience with his disability, yet have high expectations for him to complete his coursework. It's always a delicate balance, and it seems like you're trying to strike that balance between validating their experience, but not letting it consume or drive every way you define their identity. Right. So, I don't think I had a question in there, but I was just.
I'm going to jump back in again, Andrew.
Go ahead.
Denise. Anna, I know that we've talked a lot about the advocacy side and the video side and what you guys are doing on that. I know, though, for folks on this call, we've often talked about the employment of people with disabilities. So one of the things that you guys are really good at is a lot of the filmmakers and everybody on staff are people with disabilities, and how important that is to tell disability stories. I know we at AUCD have used you guys to do some outside things. Are you available to do that for others? And how does that work?
You mean work for hire?
Yeah, basically.
Yes, we are.
So promote yourself.
Yes, we do. We do some work for hire. We partner only with organizations that we feel like are aligned with our mission and values and center on disability. But yes, we do that. And we think that we bring a unique perspective to the table. Many many production companies aren't run and staffed by disabled people. And so if you want to talk about disability and make sure it's done in an authentic way, you can work with us.
That'd be cool.
Thank you. That's what I wanted.
Yes, we have a lot of video needs, and especially if we're trying to create something that's kind of consumable for YouTube. We have some courses that require video. We're going to be designing courses with some video coming up, and so having little video clips is a really great way.
Yeah, and I really strongly encourage you to make sure that your video clips are accessible. Both captions and audio description and transcripts. It takes a little longer. It may be a little more complicated at first, but it's worth it. And it sets up an important, standard. Even if you're not sure anyone needs that, who's going to watch it, you never know. And it shows that you value, accessibility, and you value including people with disabilities in the conversation, in the discussion.
I wonder if it's ever been shown. I use YouTube almost entirely for everything I consume now. I started off with books on tape, right? And listening to them in the car. But then if I listen to a video and it has video, but it doesn't describe what's on the screen, I'm tempted to look and take my eyes off the road. And so actually, as a YouTube user, sometimes that would be great, so I don't have to take my eyes off the car to see that they're showing a picture or a portrait of someone. So here's another question back to the parenting video. Could you give an example or two of it's not parenting, I read that wrong, of partner projects that you have?
For example, organizations that we work with.
Yeah, I think that's what they're
Sure. Saying. Yeah, so we just produced a whole series of videos for the Seattle Department of City of Seattle around accessibility and customer service and how to be respectful and to people with disabilities as a city employee. So that's one example. We've done gala videos for organizations that other disability organizations. We are also doing a series of videos, animated, like what we call them explains videos, for other protection and advocacy groups around the country. So there we are pooling funds, because so many of the issues overlap. If everyone chips in a little bit of money, we can make a series of videos highlighting different issues that are common throughout the country. Let's see. Yeah, those are some of the ones. We also are doing some more local ones here with the city around bike share parking and construction site access. So again, related to our students in transit work, but paid for by the city of Seattle.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. Well, we're right around the end of our time. Thank you very much, Anna. That was a really great, a great presentation. A lot, we don't have a lot of video, and it's great to see video and to see your work. And also thank you to Denise and John for presenting today. If folks want to, I guess I have to go to the next thing. We have a survey you can answer, and if you have any questions or comments or concerns, you can always email us or call us toll free. And we also have Twitter. You can tweet us or whatever you want to do. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next month. And that's it for nTIDE.